Dangerous. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a good night. It was a really good hotel that you guys put me up into. I really appreciate that. The problem is when you get it up to speed, it starts shimmying a little bit, I notice. It's got kind of a, it gets, you get up a little fast. And so that's the first earthquake I'd ever been in. So that was interesting. All right. Well, we'll get right into this. How are we doing up here? Oh, I'm going to turn this thing on too. There it is. All right, Zone 2 Network. Here we are this morning. Sorry for the confusion for the time. I know that the word didn't get propagated very well. The initial flyer I had put out, that we might have just gone ahead and stuck to that, but I really felt like it would be good to make a change, and there's just no good way to explain it. But it felt like Saturday was really dragging when I had 4 sessions set up, and just seemed like, it got to be about the time you got to the end of the third one, it was just, he's just like Charlie Brown's teacher talking, just mwah, mwah, and it's just, nobody was listening, I wasn't making any sense, we were all just kind of powering through, so, it just got to where I really felt like it'd be good to take it down to 3. Sometimes getting 3 in with some quality is better than having 4 with just a lot of quantity, you know what I mean? So that's why I did that, and I communicated that to your preacher, and he said, well, we already put out a bunch of flyers. I said, well, I'll announce it on Friday night, and I probably didn't do a great job. So if you showed up at 9 o'clock, praise the Lord. You got the exact seat you wanted in the auditorium, so you didn't have to fight anybody for it, and that's good. All right, in your Bibles, and take a look at Psalm chapter 127. I told you we'd be hitting this a lot. This psalm just really speaks to my heart. We'll read this and we'll have a word of prayer and get started this morning. Psalm chapter 127, verse 1. It's a good one to memorize. Talk about it with your family when you go out, when you come in, when you stand up, when you lay down, just like the Bible says. All right, Psalm chapter 127, verse 1, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Not my reward, his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Praise the Lord. Let's pray. Father, I just pray that you'd be with us this morning, that you'd open our hearts and our minds, Lord, to learn new things and to see things, Lord, the way you see them. Help us, Lord, to be effective in protecting our families, Lord, and ourselves. To keep purity before you, to go the right way, Lord, most of all to make our families and ourselves the most effective that we can be for the cause of your glory, Lord, and the kingdom of Jesus Christ. I pray, Lord, that we would be useful tools in your hands. We love you, Lord. We thank you for just being able to come here this morning. Thank you for keeping us safe. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now, you think about this, and you think about this, as arrows are in the hands of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. God is putting families in the terms of a war situation. I pointed that out yesterday, but I'll just spend a moment here reiterating that perhaps slightly. The Lord is the one who is comparing children to arrows in the quiver of a warrior or a mighty man. Mighty man, that is a very interesting term in the Old Testament. If you study the idea of a mighty man, you look at David's mighty man and the mightiest of the mighty men. That is an amazing study to hear about Benaniah and all these guys who were just amazingly powerful warriors because God enabled them to protect their family and their, God, if you look in the Old Testament histories and just use your brain and kind of figure out what's going on in the backgrounds of the things that's going on. David, he prayed that the Lord would cause the wars to cease. And you know why he did that? So the men could come home. If you read what David's praying for when he says, Lord, send us peace, he's praying so the men could come home, because the men were out at war. Because that was what was required right then, but they weren't at home with their families. They were out on the battlefield. He said, Lord, bring the men home. Why? So they can train their men, and the young men will be raised up like plants by the rivers of waters, and the young women will be like cornerstone, polished after the similitude of a palace. What a beautiful picture. And David said, bring the men home. Bring the warriors home. Why? So they can craft these arrows, these children, so they can smooth them out, so they can make these children hit the mark. It's just an amazing picture how the Lord uses the language to bring these things out. You know, he talks about young men, children, like plants, like trees planted by the rivers of water. You know, that's what I want for my children. You know, you can plant a tree out in the middle of a field somewhere, and it'll get rained on every once in a while, and it'll probably grow. But how much better could it be if you plant that tree by the riverside, where it gets watered all the time, where that thing can grow up strong and, this tree. That's what God says your children, your family, your life can be like. Have those children planted by the rivers of water. What's that mean? That means you're watering with the Word of God. It's not just going to church 3 times a week and having a couple of rain showers down on because the preacher preaches out of the Bible. That's not God's plan. God says plant them by the rivers of water so they get watered with the water of the Word all the time. I said this technology stuff, this is almost external to the discussions we're having here. Yeah, there's some technological things, but if you don't have the heart, you don't have anything. If you don't have the foundation, you got nothing to build on. You can talk about these zones, you can protect devices, you can protect the internet, you can protect network, which is what we're talking about right now. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Let me just point this out to you. Can any of you grow a tree? No, you can put a seed in the ground, but you're not going to grow that tree. It's just like when God tells us that He is the vine and we are the branches. You ever seen a branch? Okay, here, try this sometime. If you don't believe me, try this. You guys have apple trees around here? I don't know if this is the right, we have orchards back in southwest Missouri, and you see these guys cutting these things back all the time. And so I would drive back and forth to work. When I worked in Monette, Missouri, which was about an hour away from Springfield, once upon a time, I drove about an hour back and forth to work. And I'd see these guys out in these orchards, and they'd cut the limbs off these apple trees and pile them up and burn them. Every year, they'd trim them back. Never one time did I see in that pile of branches, one of those branches over there going, I'm going to produce fruit. It can't. It's cut off the tree. It can't produce fruit when it's cut off the tree. He is the vine. We are the branches. You're not going to produce fruit when you're cut off from the vine. Your children aren't going to produce fruit when they're cut off from the vine. We talked about Amos last night. I gave you prophets. I gave you young men for Nazarites. And what did you do? You told them don't preach. You gave them wine to drink. We got to be careful with what we put into our homes. God gave us children for a purpose. Yes, sir. To raise a godly seed. His reward, the Bible says in Psalm 127. Not our reward, His reward. He gives us an heritage, but it's His reward. All right, so Psalm chapter 127, we read that, went through it. Here's what we're talking about tonight. I brought out the idea of the castle, how on the outside of the castle, the first layer of defense is that moat. If you swim across the moat, then you've got the ramparts. You've got to climb up those ramparts to be able to get into the inside of the castle. If you can climb those ramparts, guess what you meet? You meet the archers on the top of the wall. That's another layer of defense. If you can do that, if you can do all three of those things, then you got those knights with their heavy armor and their swords and axes, and they're on the inside courtyard, and they're that final layer of defense. We see layers of defense in castles. We're going to put layers of defense in our home. We talked about the first layer last night. This is completely arbitrary. This is just something I made up. This is not something that has been scientifically tested. It is not mother approved. 3 out of 4 dentists did not tell me this was okay. Or 4 out of 5 dentists, isn't it? 4 out of 5 dentists? But this is just a way that I came up with to help people understand that there's different layers or different areas in which they can focus a security control or a layer of defense. Like I said, I just named these arbitrarily. This just kind of made sense to me after doing this in multiple different ways in my own home and in different businesses around the country. This just made sense to me to divide it up into these 4 layers. If you want to add a 5th layer, if you want to have 3 layers, that's fine, you do it. But this is just for the simplicity's sake. If you don't do this every day, this is my recommendation. We started with the devices last night. By the way, I just had a thought. Brother Carter mentioned last night that I helped with the logo for Hope. Actually, my wife designed that. I've been meaning to say that. She did that, and she did a great job, so just to point that out. But wanted to bring that out before I forgot, because my brain sometimes goes 20 different ways, and I forget that kind of stuff. Anyway, we talked about devices last night, and we actually learned some things. I learned some things last night. Something that I hadn't really thought about because I wasn't doing it that way anymore. Canine Web Protection has one feature that MobiSip does not. And that is, it gives you this idea of you can unlock it for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You can put the password in and open it up for a short period of time, and then it automatically clamps back down. MobiSip doesn't do that. I don't do that kind of stuff anymore, but somebody's pointing out last night that they every once in a while have to look at graphics for like tracks and stuff like that. And the wife in the household has the password, so she unlocks it for 15 minutes, and then you can grab one of those photo stock images, grab it and bring it down, and then it automatically locks back down. That's great. That is something that Canine does that MobiSip does not do. Like I said, I don't use it that way anymore. We did for a little while, but I found it was more effective just if Evan or Titus wanted to look at some kind of programming video or a website or some kind of thing that they're interested in, that I just tell them, go get my Surface. They sit down beside me. They sit with each other. And they never use the computer at one at a time. We don't ever consume any media individually at home. They always have to be together. If not that, if not the 2 brothers, then at least the 2 brothers and their sisters. They cannot do it by themselves. The TV is not to be on when there's only one of them there. They can't play a game when there's only one of them there. They certainly cannot look at the internet when there's only one of them there. We don't do that. Where's your internet buddy? Find your, seriously. It's just good. Because they less likely to get into trouble that way. Yes, or at least in a way that's not reported back to Dad. So, because Titus, my boy Titus, he's not to say that Evan isn't, but you'll see their pictures in a minute. Titus just got called to preach. We're just really praising the Lord for that. The Lord's been on him for about a year. We knew it was coming. It wasn't like it was a mystery. Titus, matter of fact, it's always been kind of obvious that Titus, he's always been our theologian, but he wouldn't, there's no way that something would happen that Titus, the Lord would just climb all over him, and he has to get things right. Even when there's really nothing wrong, he still has to get things right, if you know what I'm talking about. Evan, he gets things right too, but sometimes he has to struggle a little bit more with it. But together, they're safer. So we talked about devices last night. Canine is a good technology. MobiSip, like for what I'm doing, I can control it from the office. I don't have to be there at home fiddling with each computer. It's great because it's got that web administration. If it can't get to mobisip.com, it says I'm not going anywhere. It defaults to a safe position. If it can't communicate with the rule set that I've configured on their website, it says no traffic. So it's a fail-safe, not a fail-open technology. Canine Web Protection, also very good. If it can't get to the internet, then it doesn't go anywhere either because it's just on each individual computer. So That's just the way it works. Another one that was mentioned, your pastor mentioned Net Nanny. They use that a lot of times on the on their iPhones and different Mac devices. That's probably maybe a good Mac technology that would be more Mac. It also has a Windows version. Any one of those things, they all pretty much work almost indistinguishably. There's probably highs and lows for each, pluses and minuses, pros and cons. The thing to remember is don't have just one line of defense, particularly for your children. Second thing to remember, and I will get into this on Sunday morning in Sunday school, Lord willing, but one of the things that you've got to do is prepare your day. You can't just let things happen to you. You just can't let it happen. You've got to be prepared long before you start to the day to know, you've got to be in prayer, in your Bible. And I'll hit it really hard, but the model prayer everybody knows, some people call it the Lord's Prayer, I don't, it's the model prayer. But you know the thing that people don't really pay attention to? The Lord instructs us to pray, Lord, lead us not into temptation. If you are not taking advantage, the Lord says, ask me to keep temptation away from you. If you're not taking advantage of that, quite frankly, you're doing it wrong. Literally, that needs to be part of your daily prayer. Lord, lead me, keep temptation away from me. This thing is troubling me. Keep it far away from me. You got to prepare. You got to preload that thing every morning when you get up. Don't wait till something happens and then go, oh great, now I got to confess it or now I got to deal with it. Know what you're going to do before it happens. Boy Scouts, be prepared, right? Come on. This isn't rocket science. It isn't even rocket surgery. All right, so we're going to talk about network here. That's the data plumbing in your home. You don't really think about it. People go to Walmart, people go to Amazon, they buy a Wi-Fi access point, they plug it in. They don't really ever think about it again because a lot of times it just works. But there's a lot of things that we can do here in this network that can give us some security and some protection. The vulnerability is it is direct access to the outside. If it's misconfigured, if it's set up to be open, you don't have any real control over it. There's certain things like that. If I don't mention it again, I want to mention it now. Giving your children devices that you do not have administrative control locked down on. That means they can jump off of your network and jump onto the neighbor's network, where there's probably zero controls. That means they can go into a library and get on the public Wi-Fi there, where there are no controls. You've got to be careful the type of administrative access because you can jump off of... By the way, just so you know, young people, if you jump onto somebody else's Wi-Fi without permission, that is technically a federal offense. It is wire fraud. If you get onto somebody's Wi-Fi without permission, it is wire fraud. It is a federal offense. Yeah, that's a little bit of a weird thing, and it's just the way the law is shook out, but it's still true. Just so you know, I tell my kids that all the time. Not that they do it, but I want them to be scared. Because it is a big deal. It is a big deal. Hello. All right. Everybody hold your breath. So the exploitation of that vulnerability could be unfiltered use, misconfigured systems, unprotected passwords, give somebody access to something that they should not have access to. Quite frankly, something that no Christian should have access to. You too, Dad. You too, Mom. Security controls. Install some web content filtering. Of course, we talked about that last night on the device level. And what was the key thought with the protections you have to put on devices? They have to travel with the device. You shouldn't have it set up so it only works at home. We talked about that. The problem with saying the computers must only be used in the living room where everybody is, that worked great 20 years ago, but now people take the computers with them. It's not just a desktop, one PC that uses a modem. It has to have a phone line. Now you can go anywhere with it. So the protections on the device side have to travel with the system. Here, this thing's not going to go anywhere. This is your home Wi-Fi. You've got a connection. You plug it in. You put it in a closet somewhere, and you kind of forget about it. If I don't mention this again, I probably will, but just so I can say it right now. This is the kind of stuff, if you can, put it in the master bedroom closet or in the master bedroom. Why do you want to do that? Because you're going to install some protections. You don't want somebody to wire around it. Do you think your kids will do that? I don't know. But it's in the closet of the master bedroom. They're going to have a hard time getting in there without me noticing. Locked doors keep an honest man honest. There's no temptation where there's no possibility. So, it's just, this creates a second layer of defense. Also, I have a device that I'm going to talk about in just a second that also enforces time of day. Once again, it's another layer of protection, belt and suspenders. Even the cheapest, the most cheap and inexpensive, matter of fact, when we moved to Raleigh a couple of years ago, all of my stuff was packed up. We got an internet connection because I use it for work and various other things. We got that pretty quickly, but we didn't know where all of our networking stuff was from the house. So we went to Walmart and bought the cheapest Belkin Wi-Fi access point we could find. I mean, it was like $29.95. It was the Earl Scheib of internet access points. Anybody know who Earl Scheib was? All right. I'm getting long in the tooth on that joke. I say that to the young guys at work, and they're like, what? I said, never mind. Just $99.95. Forget it. And if you want blue, red, or black, you're great. All right, so, but we just bought this cheap thing. But even the cheapest of the Wi-Fi access points actually have some pretty good security features. I won't spend time. I actually did a demo of this once, and everybody said, yeah, big deal. But this is configurable. And one of the things that you configure, and this is, you can see it, I mean, people, they have usually a web page you get into. Most people don't because they don't even know that it's there. But every computing device in the world that uses a network, whether it's wired or wireless, has this thing called the MAC address, M-A-C. You don't have to remember this. I'm just going to just describe it to you. MAC stands for Media Access Control. It is a 48-bit hexadecimal number. Hexadecimal is a way to actually have 16 characters instead of 10. We use decimal numbers 1 through 10. Hexadecimal is 1 through 16. It's, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then so you can stay to one digit, goes A, B, C, D, E, F. So a hexadecimal is base 16 instead of base 10. So you see these things, when you see these things on the screen, you can't really see that from here, but you'll see it on your phone. Hurt my toe yesterday. I tried to break it, fall down the stairs yesterday morning, and then I decided to injure it again this morning, so I'm kind of limping around today. But it wasn't the brightest thing I've ever done. Let's see, there it is. So if you go to if you have an iPhone, you can get to this in Android too, but if you have an iPhone, I know a lot of people do, go into your settings, go into General, go to About, so Settings, General, About, and then you've got all these things that you've probably never paid attention to before. One of those down there will be Wi-Fi address. About halfway down that page of listing things. Mine is 30:63:6B:. Well, that's the MAC address. That is a hexadecimal number. They've divided it up with 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, colon. That is the hardware address of this device. There should be no other physical device in the entire world that has that address. Yes, it can be spoofed, but that's a different topic for a different discussion. For the most part, there's no way that there can ever be another address just like that. Why? Because the first half of the MAC address is the manufacturer's code that the FCC awards to different vendors. So Apple gets that first half, that's unique to them. The second half is like the serial number the manufacturer puts in. So even if 2 manufacturers have the same serial numbers, the first half of the code is assigned by the FCC. I think FCC, maybe FTC, I don't know, I can't remember. Anyway, but they should never be the same. When you put the 2 halves together, you should never have a collision between 2 different devices. They should always be unique. On any Wi-Fi access point you can think of, you can turn on MAC address filtering. It takes a little bit of doing sometimes on some of the cheaper ones, but you can say, this phone and my wife's phone and my wife's computer are the only 3 things in the entire world that can use this Wi-Fi access point. You can lock it out by the MAC address. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, because sometimes, and it depends, if you've got close neighbors where there's a bunch of people around and there's an open Wi-Fi access point, I'll talk about that in a second, it may not be as effective. But if you're living out and you can't see any other Wi-Fis and you've just got that one, well, your kids might have maybe a Nintendo DS. That can get on the internet. You know, if you can actually lock that down and say, well, they don't have the password. I don't think they have the password. Maybe they do. I don't know. When was the last time I changed it? When was the last time you changed it? But I could actually lock it out so they can't get a connection at all. I can lock out every other device in the world but the 3 I say. Yeah, it takes a little bit of doing. You got to go in there and you got to type them in. You got to find out what they are and type them in. But it is a security feature that sits there and that you could use in the right situation to make things right. I'm not advocating you go do that. I think there's a better way. But I'm saying even with the cheapest access point, there are security features that people may not be taking advantage of. By the way, if you do have a neighbor, you pull it up there and it says, you know, it's like neighbor, the Smith's Wi-Fi, and it shows up as open, go knock on their door. There's nothing wrong with you to say, hey, you know, I noticed that you had an open Wi-Fi. Would you do me a favor? I mean, if it's no trouble and it doesn't mess you up, I would really appreciate if you put a password on that. I've got kids over here, and I just, you know, I'm trying to control what they see and what they have access to. And if it wouldn't be too much trouble, and I can help you if you need help, but if you could put a password on that, that'd be great. Somebody knocked on my door and asked that question politely, I wouldn't be mad. I mean, I got to live there. I got neighbors. The same reason my 8-year-old, he was throwing rocks into the neighbor's yard the other day. Well, it was about a month ago. And she came over, man, she was hot. I mean, hot. And so what I did was, I said, I really apologize. I did not know that. I will take care of this. I will take care of this immediately. And so Nolan and I had some deep, heartfelt fellowship. And Nolan's a good kid. Oh, he's a good kid. He really is. But this was just kids do things. He's a sinner. He's a boy. He likes to throw things. In that case, he was throwing rocks. It happened to be over the back fence. So we took care of that. I said, Nolan, go get a quick shower. Get all cleaned up. Get your hair combed. Get a polo on. Get some nice jeans on. And we walked around there to that neighbor's door. And I said, this is you, man. You go up and knock at the door. And he did. And the dad of that particular household answered. And Nolan, I said, you offended her. You need to apologize to him, but you need to make sure you apologize to her. And he did. And he broke down. He did a really good job. But this was part of him growing up. He had offended a neighbor, and I needed him to make it right with that neighbor. Why? Because we want to see the cause of Christ go forward. They know we go to church. You don't think they don't know we go to church? They watch us, and no way am I going to have that. And I explained this to Nolan, and he was heartfelt and sorry. He did not want to lower the cause of Christ in somebody else's mind, and so he went and apologized. You know what? If you deal with your neighbors nicely and you deal with them respectfully, you can get a lot of things accomplished. In this case, you can go to a neighbor and say, Mister, ma'am, I'd really appreciate it if you put a Wi-Fi password on that. It doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be complex, but I'm trying to protect my kids over here, and I'd just love it if I had your help. Nothing wrong with that at all. Anyway, I'm just saying there's features there that you can use. There's also just, you need to have some kind of firewall just for the identity theft and that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of things there. But we talked about this yesterday. This is the same slide as yesterday, talking about Microsoft Windows. But here's the simple thing. On the network, in the network settings of, I put this in the network side just because I felt like it made more sense here, because you got to go out to the internet to get this accomplished. But I was talking about time of day restrictions and parental controls and the things that are built into Windows 10 and Windows 8 or Windows 7. This is my desktop. I actually captured the mouse this time. But in Windows 10, you can go to the All Settings. Brings up a tab that looks like this. And if you go into Accounts, there's my stunningly good-looking picture there from several years ago. Just happened to be the one built into Microsoft. You can go to Family and Other Users, and you can see I've got Karis, Evan, and Titus. They can't sign in, but I can allow my wife to sign in. This is my Surface. So I can turn that on, I can turn it off. But I can also go to this little link underneath that says Manage Family Settings Online. That'll open up the Microsoft Live website. I think it's live, or accounts.microsoft.com. And there you can see my family. And it's got a bunch of settings over there on the other side. This is Evan. Give it a second. All right. So under screen time, I can turn it on or off to set limits for that computer. I've got it set up at 8 to 9. I can turn the whole thing off. I can turn the whole thing on. I can also set a daily limit. So 12 hours per day, 2 hours per day. After that, it shuts it off. I can turn on the ratings of different games that support that. You can say, I don't want any games, or I can say nothing that's older than 12 years old acceptable for any types of games. For web browsing, there's some limited controls here built into Microsoft that would work on all the computers on your network. Block inappropriate websites, you can turn that off and on. I turned it on. I don't know what it means. Microsoft doesn't elucidate. That's why I'm saying I don't trust this. But it's just a good layer of protection. Why not use it? It's there. And it also, you can whitelist and blacklist sites right there built into Microsoft Windows as just part of having an account in the Windows family controls or family protection system. It's pretty simple to do. Literally, it jumps in a link there and it'll walk you through it. So if you go to your settings, go to the accounts, go to family settings, it's right there. If you've never set it up before, it walks you through it. And there's some really good control to put in there. So now you've noticed I've got 2 layers of protection on the computers in my home. First off, I have MobiSip, which is what I use, that has timeouts. So does K9 Protections, by the way. It has time of day settings. I don't know if NetNanny does. Anybody use it and know for sure? It does? Okay, I figured it probably did. So you can do a layer of protection there for time of day settings. The reason I say that, computers don't need to be used at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's no need for that. Let's just shut it off. I'm terminating an entire class of risk when I remove that capability. Here's a second layer of protection. In Windows, also I believe in Mac, I'm not exactly sure where that one is, but I can put a operating system layer of protection for time of day right there. And some additional controls there that Microsoft gives me for block inappropriate sites. Once again, I don't know what that means to Microsoft. I've looked, can't really find a good listing of what exactly they mean by that. But it's there. It's better than nothing, so I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to use other things, but I'm going to turn it on because I have the capability to do so. I'm going to use what's provided. And that's the thing that's like, well, this isn't very good. And you see people on the internet all the time saying, well, it's just not comprehensive enough. It's junk. Yeah, but it does something. Use what you can out of it. I mean, turn it all on. Yeah, okay, so it's not comprehensive. I don't rely on it. But why not have another layer of protection? It's free. That's my favorite price. All right, so we turn that on. K9 MobiSip, I'm going to add NetNanny on there because I haven't really tested it, but I have seen it many, many times in its listed, in comparisons. So that's just another layer of protection. Now here's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Matter of fact, our youth pastor at church, when I brought this up, he's like, I went and looked. I never knew that was there because he had a PS4. Of course, they've just got like a 4-month-old baby. No, they've got a year-old baby, and they just had a second. They just had a little girl. So they've never really come across this in their life. They've only been married for like 2 years. And so he's never really thought about this, but I think every one of the gaming systems that's sold out there, the majority ones, have a web browser built in. Did you guys know that? Certainly have one on the Wii. Nintendo is possibly the most family-oriented and friendly of the three manufacturers, and they have a web browser that doesn't really have any type of filtering on it. You can turn the whole thing off, and I do. They do have good parental controls on the Wii itself. So I can turn all that stuff off. I can control it pretty well, as a matter of fact. We have a Wii U. Just, I can't say that I'm the most spiritual person in the world, but we have a Wii U. The boys play it. They actually get to play like one day a week, one afternoon. I think it's Friday afternoons for the big boys, and the little guys get to play on Tuesdays, I think, after school and all of their chores are done. They don't just get to turn it on anytime they want. That is for sure. But we got it there, and they play little games, and they blow up space aliens. Star Fox is one they've been playing lately. Get to shoot ships. I like that. No blood and guts. Anyway, we don't play, by the way, blood and guts kind of games ever at all. It's just not something we do. No shooting people or aliens or anything like that. That's just not something that's allowed. But here's the thing. They do have access to browsers. Most of them also have YouTube channels. Again, with no particular protections on them. If you don't know that it's there, better find out what you got going on in your house. So, what do you do about that? Well, you can unplug the network. But there's a lot of times these things are online. So, this is something that's a risk. Maybe that's just something you unplug and you live with the fact that you can't play it. Maybe if the dad is the only one that plays it, maybe you get rid of this and you do some other things. Yeah. It's not wrong just to throw the whole thing out the window. You ever know the concept of defenestration? Anybody know what defenestration is? Have you ever actually experienced personal defenestration? Nobody knows what that means? It means to throw something out the window. To defenestrate it. It's just a legal term. I don't know how I know that, but that's just something. So maybe you take the Xbox or the PS4 or even the Wii and you perform an act of defenestration. That's okay. As long as you put something back in its place that's godly and spiritual, you can do that. It's totally all right. You bought the thing. You can get rid of it. That's right. I mean, what? Does it have some kind of supernatural control over you? But there's things, if you keep it, and I'm not saying it's even wrong. I'm not here to make that decision for your family. I'm just telling you the things that could be risky about it. Yeah, there's all kinds of wicked games out there. And by the way, most of the time when you do comic books and this kind of stuff like they do in these games, the women are not drawn in a way that promotes modesty. So that's not something my boys are going to be looking at. I tell you what, man, standards have changed. I'm telling you, my standards have changed, and even our worldwide standards have changed. But I remember when I was little, Saturday morning cartoons, they don't have those anymore. But I remember there was a Flash Gordon cartoon that I thought was great. And I'm like, oh man, this is so exciting. And back when you used to get discs and Netflix, remember when they used to mail them to you back in the old days? But we got this discs, and I was thinking, well, I get this, and they had this Flash Gordon cartoon. I was like, oh, great. The boys were like 5 and 6. I'm like, man, we're gonna watch this. They're gonna love this. And so I get the first one, and I mean, man, to say that the ladies were drawn in a way that was a little bit unrealistic is to probably be a little bit to minimize the situation. We ripped that thing out there. I'm like, well, we can't watch this. I don't know. I don't want the 6-year-olds to look at it, but I don't want to look at it. It's like, how did I watch this back in the 80s? I didn't know, for one thing, and I wasn't saved. And it just, I don't know. I can't explain it. But sometimes just because something was good once doesn't mean it's good now. Measure. What's the Bible say? The Bible says, try the spirits to see if they be of God. I mean, you better be analyzing this stuff. Don't go on autopilot. Wii's, not necessarily anything wrong with playing games. Xbox, I guess. I don't know. I don't own one. PS4, I don't own one of those. But I'm sure there's ways to have a little bit of entertainment. There's no reason why we can't have entertainment, but you better be analyzing it. And if it's not good and the Lord says get rid of this, then get rid of it. Because, you know, the Lord knows more about what's going on with your family than you do. The boys know more about, the Lord knows more about what might be going on in the minds of your children than you do. So maybe you don't know why the Lord's saying dump this thing, but maybe you need to. I don't know. I'm not telling you one way or the other. But marketplaces also have unrated demos. Now, most of these things are Wi-Fi connected or internet connected, and they have marketplaces so you can buy games, and they can push ads to you and see new videos of new games and stuff like that. Most of those are unrated. That doesn't mean they're necessarily bad, but that means they could be. It may be something that you don't want your children to see, and there's no way to take it out of there, so be careful. On the Wii, I turn off the marketplace. If they need to look at something or they're interested in something, we might turn it on for a second and let them see it. But then we turn it back off after that particular job is done. Anyway, just be careful. Chromecast. This is a little device made by Google. It's about yay big. I have one. I should have brought it. It's basically just a way to stream things to a TV. It's just a little stick. It's got a DVI port on one end and a power port on the other end. You plug it in, you hook it up to your network, and then it can accept streaming video from a computer or your phone or a tablet or something like that. So if you use Netflix and you have the Netflix app on your phone, you can buy one of these things, plug it into your TV, and you can stream Netflix, whatever's on your phone, to the TV. No wires, no nothing, just works over Wi-Fi. And it's really good quality because once you tell it to go, it reaches out to Netflix and pulls the video down directly. So it's not like it's a picture of a picture, it's actually doing it directly. What's good about this? Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, it's cheap. It's like 30 or 40 bucks at the most. You pay it once, you're done. No renewing, no recurring subscriptions. What do I like about this specifically? If you're in a situation where you really want to lock this thing down and you want to control exactly what's coming in on Netflix, guess what you have to make this work? One of these. Guess what my sons don't have? One of these. You know, that thing does nothing without something feeding it video. I can leave this out all day long. I have no problems. I mean, the little boys could play with it all day long. You can plug it in, you can unplug it, you can put it on this TV, that TV. It will do absolutely nothing except show scenic pictures, you know, in kind of a slideshow. It will do absolutely nothing without something feeding it video. The only things in my household that can feed it video are my phone and my wife's phone. Just because that's the only ones that have the Netflix app. Because I lock that down so they can't install it anywhere else, and they don't have iDevices anyway. So this is a really safe way if you want to watch television shows or something like that. This is a really safe way to do this because this Chromecast is nothing but like a piece of plumbing. It doesn't do anything really by itself. Follow me? It's just a thought. You know, I'm not here to tell you what movies to watch or, you know, well, actually, I can tell you biblically what you shouldn't be watching, and you know it just as well as I do. But, you know, hey, you know what? I like John Wayne movies occasionally. I'll watch a Western. I like World War II movies. I like black and white movies. Sometimes I make my boys watch black and white movies. They're like, Dad, it's black and white. And then at the end of it, they go, wow, that was really good. I'm like, yeah. So here you go. What is it? It's like black and white. And they're like, oh. I don't know if I ever acted like that. I'm sure I did. They don't act anything like I did. Praise the Lord for that. But anyway, they act like their mom. So it's simple to use. Here's another thing you might not know about. It's called the Clear Play. It's made by a bunch of Mormons. And you know what? They make two of the technologies I'm going to talk about. And they don't know anything about the Bible. They don't know anything about the Lord. But they actually do, by pure physical effort, have strongly held morals. Or at least they say they do. A lot of times, like I said, it's human effort. where they're trying to focus on the outward, not the inward. Remember what we talked about last night? Well, this is one of the ways they focus on the outward, but we can use it. This device is a DVD player. Plays DVDs and Blu-rays, hooks up just like any other device. It connects to your Wi-Fi. What does it do? It plays movies. You can get any movie just about out of the red box, take it home, put it in this thing, and play it. But it has filters. For any movie that's supported, and actually it's got a PIN code, you can lock it out, so if it doesn't have a filter available for that movie, it won't play. That's the way we got ours set up. You can actually set it so if it's like a G-rated movie, it'll just play automatically, but everything else has to have a filter. What is a filter? A filter is basically just a little file that ClearPlay makes that says, play the first 15 seconds, then skip 2 seconds. Play the next 2 minutes, then skip 5 seconds. What's it doing? By the settings you put on there, you can lock out all nudity, anything sexual content. You can have it bleep out bad words. But literally, it will skip past a scene, just exactly past a scene where there might be nudity or something like that on it. So you never even see it. And guess what? News to Hollywood, most of the time, you never even miss it. Because there's absolutely no plot development that requires nudity. Absolutely. By the laws of fiction, I can say that without any equivocation. You do not need sexual content to actually develop a character or drive the plot forward. Matter of fact, it usually detracts from it. So, here's the thing. You can put that disc in there. Now, sometimes if you pick the wrong movie, the movie may be 30 minutes long. We had that one time because there's several different filters, and they're very static. There's nudity, there's sexual content, there's bloodshed, blasphemous. There's actually one of the category. There's bad language or profanity. There is disrespectful to flag. I like that one. We always leave that one turned on. They used to have, they changed this, but we used to joke about it all the time. You used to have a category called excessive mushiness. We loved that category. I didn't want any of that excessive mushiness in my household. What was that? I mean, that was like kissing or ooh, kind of googly eye stuff. You could turn that stuff off. I think they folded that into a different category, but that's good. But we had each category has 4 layers: off, moderate, middle of the road, and then high. And we had the bloodshed turned up to high, and we put a war movie in, and it's like boom, 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 and it's like, what just happened? And the movie's half over. We're like, what? Okay, we're going to have to adjust this filter. So, because, I wanted to see this war movie. And that's how effective it works. It's very solid. It might not have the exact settings you want. You might end up with more filtering than you want, which is not a bad thing. It would be bad if you had less filtering than you want. So it might go over the top a little bit, but it's good and it works very well. These things aren't that expensive. It's the cost of a DVD player. Yes, sir? Where do you get it? You have to order it online from ClearPlay. It's the only places you can get them. They tried to expand this into other manufacturers, and nobody really bought into it because it's just people like us that don't want their kids to look at filth. Yes? Yes, there is an annual subscription. It's not much, like $20 or something like that to get. But basically, once you hook this up to the Wi-Fi, we used to have this memory stick, and you had to go to a computer, and you had to download the filters and put it on the stick, and you had to take it to the player and stick it in the front end and wait for it to figure itself out. Now it's Wi-Fi connected, so you put the disc in, and it just goes out and grabs them. So that works. It works much better than it used to. But even when you had to do it on the memory sticks, it was still very solid the way it worked. Yes? Movies only. DVDs and Blu-rays. But it does have all the connections in the back, so if you like surround sound, all that stuff, that's a big deal, then this will work, which is kind of cool. I don't have that. My wife won't let me. But I'm not bitter. Yes?
On their website, they have live streaming.
Yes. They do. And you can do the live filtering on some movies. I have a different one that I use for that. I tried that once, wasn't terribly pleased with it because it's kind of... Yeah, it does. And they have a very limited amount of movies they do play. But ClearPlay does do some live streaming, so you can rent movies and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how it works. The one... Oh, here, I'll come back to that since we're on the subject. Nope. Okay, I won't come back to that. I must have that in a different one. We use a thing called, oh my word. No, we use a different service on the internet. VidAngel, thank you very much. VidAngel is the one we use. For streaming, you can rent movies. Actually, you buy movies and then you sell them back. So you buy them for 20 bucks and you sell them back for 19 if you sell them back the next day, and the next day it's 18 and keeps going until you just own it. But it has a very full featured filtering. I mean, down to where you know by this filters how much it's taking out, and it's like there's this, it even uses asterisks to kind of give you the idea of like, this word was used 4 times in this particular point, and this point, and this point. And you can turn each of them on and off individually if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you could. So the features, the filtering is very, goes very deep. Probably deeper than anybody wants. We have it set up just in general and just use it that way. But you could go down and if you really felt like you were missing something and it was important and it wasn't what they said it was, you could turn it back on. Yes? Nope. Nope. It stays on there. It stays totally inside their app. We use the app. Yep. Nope. We have the app on our we actually can use the app on our iPhones, but we also have a VidAngel channel on the Roku. This thing right here, you can't see it because it's dark on dark, but the Fire TV also has a channel for VidAngel. So there's a way to basically, and you can browse and you can buy right there. You can set up pins and do all kinds of stuff. So VidAngel was really slow initially getting their filtering out, but now they're pretty up to date. You might have to wait a week. Something gets released, you might have to wait a week if it's a brand new movie, but they're building up their library pretty quickly. So again, another Mormon company. ClearPlay is good because you generally don't have to wait much at all. They're pretty big and they're pretty right on the spot with their filters. You generally can't go get a disc. Maybe the first day a movie gets released, they might not have a filter ready. But I've not really run into that lately because we just don't rent movies that often. So by the time we are watching a DVD, we put it in there and the filter's already there. Like I said, I've got mine set up so it locks out. If it's rated over PG, you have to have the PIN number. And if there is no filter available, it will not play it because it's got a menu setting. It's kind of hard to use the control, but you can set all that stuff up. So just a thought. Like I said, I'm not trying to tell you to go watch movies. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying occasionally people watch movies. If you're going to do that, have a way to do that so it keeps your kids safe. What do I don't want to happen? I don't want movies sitting around in the house with just a regular DVD player that they might watch sometime when I'm not around. So that's what I'm going for here. Amazon Fire TV. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. By the way, I don't. I don't even have a book table in the back. So that's not my purpose. I've looked at all these things and I've compared them all as far as the features versus things. People have this kind of stuff. We have a Roku at home. We're getting ready to replace it with one of these because it's like the first Roku ever made, and it's getting pretty tardy. It needs to be put out to pasture, to be honest with you. It doesn't connect half the time. It's becoming a pain to use. The remote control has been dropped so many times it's mostly black tape now instead of plastic. So because there's a show called Battle Bots where people build robots and beat each other up, or beat the robots up, remote control. Our boys like that. They like engineering stuff and things like that, and we can watch that. So that's something they do on the Roku when they have permission. So Roku is one. Fire TV is another. Notice again, Apple TV is again another one that could be doing this. It doesn't. The 3 things that I'm looking for is the Netflix, Amazon Prime TV, and occasionally Hulu. Like I said, the thing with the Amazon Fire TV that is different than the Roku, and I think also the Apple TV is, for the Fire, you can put a PIN or a password on each channel and all channels. So you can lock things out by content. you know, the rating. Again, you can't trust that necessarily, but it is a protection. But you can also put a pin on each channel. So the thing can be sitting there. Now, of course, I've got time of day on ours as well through the Circle device, but the thing could be sitting there, and even if nobody's around, somebody picks up the remote, they still have to have the password to fire up Netflix. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes. Yeah. With the smart TVs, it's a little bit more difficult because, yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people probably in that same boat. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem. There's ways you could do it. It depends on how elaborate you want to get. I've got a way that I'm going to talk about in the physical. One thing to do is, does it just play automatically just because the TV's on, you plug it in and it goes? Or do you have to have the remote if you plug the thumb drive in? Okay. Well, that's something to investigate. If it just automatically plays, then yeah, that could be a problem. If it requires using the remote, that's why I collect the remotes. So, yeah, that could be. That could be. Well, I was thinking maybe the menuing system of the TV, you know, it might pop up and say, do you want to play this? But if you don't have the buttons, you can't. Okay. So, but there might be buttons on the side of the television that you can do that with. So, you know, like I said, that's something to think about. And there may not be a way to help that, except, well, actually, there is a couple of ways to help that. It depends on how elaborate you want to get. I'm going to talk about something in the physical. You can make sure to kill the power on the TV itself if you do it right. But there's also, we use this in the industrial control system world all the time. They actually make little USB locking devices. It's like a padlock. You plug it into the USB. It requires a special key to unlock without physically damaging the USB port. So in the industrial control world, you know, where we have physical security requirements, there's companies out there, electrical companies, that are just buying slews of these things and locking down all it. Because what you used to do, and you could still do this if you wanted to, you could fill it full of hot glue. I'm serious. You can't get that stuff out of places. And so that's what we used to do back in the old days. If you wanted to secure the ports of a computer, you'd fill them all full of hot glue. And then you can't use them because you can't get that stuff out of there. But so that's one way to do it. Yeah, that's security through obscurity is what we call that. And that only goes so far. Yeah, it hides it. Nobody knows that website's there. So anyway, but yeah, you can fill it full of hot glue. That's on the cheap side. If you ever want to use it again, it's one of those locks, but they're kind of expensive. They're like 30 or 40 bucks just to get like one. Yeah. It looks tiny, but they're really complex little pieces of plastic, and they know they've got it and you don't, so they charge their price. Any other questions on that? That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that, the autoplay features of a TV. Now, the way to control the Netflix and stuff like that, that still has to use the Wi-Fi, and that's where the Circle comes in there. So, there it is. But like I said, if you're going to buy a streaming device and you don't have one, this one has the ability to assign pins and content ratings on each channel, which is somewhat unique. I know the Roku can't do that. They do have content rating restrictions, but the idea of putting a pin on the different channels, that's pretty cool. And it's controlled from the Amazon site, so again, you can't just take this thing and reset it to nothing. You know, you can't take the box, reset it to factory defaults and get around it. You actually have to be on the Amazon site with the passwords there. So again, can't really do that, but also has a category. It can play music, it can play movies, it can show photos and stuff like that, and you can lock that all out by category too. Like I said, there's a lot of control on this one. All right, now we get to the meat of it. Like I said last night, if I was going to spend money to do this, and I could just buy one thing, this would be the one thing I would buy. There is a new device out called the Torch, which is a Wi-Fi access port that has some of these same features. But most people already have a Wi-Fi access point. Not only that, the Torch is pretty expensive. And not only that, the Torch, one of these days, Wi-Fi technology will get faster, and the torch won't be able to be upgradable. This thing will work regardless of how fast the Wi-Fi goes. This is a little cube. It's about the size of a softball or a baseball, but a complete cube. Has 2 ports in the back. Network port that they don't even, I mean, they built it, but they don't even force you to use it. It can be Wi-Fi only, and a little power port. This is complete web filtering and control for the network. It only works on your network. That's why you have to have device level control as well. But as long as things are on your network, like your Fire TVs or your Rakus or things like that, this will work on it. As long as computers are hooked up to your network, like a desktop, like my boys' homeschool computers, this helps work with that. So this works just on your network. Now Circle has just released an additional thing called Circle Go, which goes along with, like devices and pads. It actually can install, and you pay an annual fee for that or something like that. So haven't tested that yet. I've got some upsides and downsides to that. My upside is it would be simple. The downside is you just have one layer of protection. If somebody gets that one access to that one control system, they have access to everything. Right now I've got 2 different systems. I have MobiSip and the Circle. So you'd actually have to be able to control both of them to defeat them both. See what I'm saying? If you have one thing, you just have to defeat one thing. But it would be simpler. So if you had just one thing and you were just able to do one thing, this would be it. I would look into the Circle Go. Like I said, I haven't really spent that much time with it. What is Circle? Circle is a network device. You plug into your network. You what they call bond it to your Wi-Fi, and it pretty much takes over your home network. And through the use of the app, which I'll show you in just a second, I can control, I could pause the internet at home right now. I could turn off the internet and nothing would work from here right now. I could turn off individual devices at home right now. I could turn off a child's devices that were assigned to that child at home right now from where I am. Anytime I want. I can look at the complete history of what each of those profiles has done. All the websites they may have gone to, how long they've been on things. I can control things like down to the app level. I could turn off Pinterest. And if I did that, you could hear my wife shouting from here. Pinterest is like crack for ladies. And I think that probably needs to be added to the HOPE program. Guys have enough problems, don't worry. Don't worry. That's just a joke. But I'm telling you, you could control things individually on an app-by-app basis because each of those have a different type of connection profile, and the Circle knows that. So you have sliders where you can turn things on and off. Here's what the app looks like. This is the home page of my Circle app. I've got a video of it here in a second that actually works now. I found out what the problem was. So when I pull up Circle, this is what it looks like. You can see, I wonder if my pointer works. Yeah, it does, because it's not a TV. That pause button basically pauses the entire internet of my entire home. I push that button, the screen goes blue instead of white, so it goes white on blue instead of blue on white. That means the whole network is shut down. You'll see the picture, again, my stunningly good-looking picture there. My wife, my daughter, Evan, Titus, Nolan, that's an old picture of Nolan, Liam, and Colin. Nolan, Liam, and Colin don't have any devices right now. They did have tablets, but they broke them, and I wasn't sad. Anyway, but they could be on there. And then you also see this big home picture in the middle. That is all the devices that aren't really assigned to a particular person, like the Raku. That goes into the home profile. There's a little tab up at the top. That's all the devices that are detected on my network. There's a couple of things that I don't control with the Circle. One of those things is the network printer. We have a Brother network copier fax printer thing. Plugs in the network. I don't control that with the Circle. You can't browse the internet with it. It just sits there. It's just, I could, but I don't see any real reason to. It's just a printer. So that's what the home screen looks like. I can touch on any of those circles and get into that person's profile. Let's see. Each one of those profiles has a basic category that you can set up. They have pre-K, green, kid, which is yellow, teen is orange, adults red, and then none is purple. If I go back, you notice that none of these circles are purple. All of our devices are being monitored. My wife, myself, and my daughter are in the adult band. The boys are not in teen because that actually gives too much stuff, I think. They're under kid. The little guys are all pre-K, but of course they don't have any devices anyway, so I just wanted their pictures there, so because it makes them feel like they're important when they see that they're on the app too. So, on this thing, you can see, here's the pre-K, you can see there's very few sliders. There's a slider for Amazon, slider for Disney, Netflix, PBS, and YouTube. PBS is turned on. I don't know why, it's just the default setting. Again, the little guys don't have any devices, so this really doesn't matter. You can scroll up, and then there's other things down below. You can turn on, you can force Google safe search. You can turn on, you can turn off YouTube, or turn on the YouTube safe mode, I think is what they call it. And then, of course, you can whitelist and blacklist websites down underneath. I'll show you that in a second. Here is the teen. Notice how many sliders are on the kid level? Here's the teen. Again, like I said, it gives a little bit too much. Amazon, Facebook, FaceTime, HBO. Who would give their kids access to HBO? I mean, that's just, anyway. Maybe you do. Hey, pray, you know, bless your heart. Lord can deal with that. But, you know, Hulu, Instagram, Meerkat, which is a video chatting thing, Minecraft PE, that's the old school Minecraft mode. And then at the bottom, and you can barely see it, there's a little orange bound there that has a little arrow that says custom filters. If you go in there, that's where you can assign additional websites or blacklist websites. Here's the home. Here's our home tab. You can see that that particular day that I took the screenshot, there was, of all of those devices, there were 40 minutes that day spent in any of these 7 devices that were attached to the home. There was 40 minutes spent. And you can say, well, this is set up as the teen level. Well, yeah, because it's like the Roku and stuff like that is what's here. It's not individual kids' computers or something like that. It's the Roku, which is a web streaming device, and it doesn't work if I take this below teen. But again, I have protection set up differently. It has time limits. So if you say 2 hours on that time limit, when that number 40 minutes gets up to 2 hours, that profile shuts off. So I can assign a time limit each day to that group of devices. Yes, sir? It could. It could. That would add to your count. But if it's your iPad and your computer, then you wouldn't set up a time limit for yourself. So you got, yeah, that's something to measure. You know, maybe you want a time limit for yourself. I don't know, brother. It's just up to you. But yeah, I tell you what, you get. Have you ever been really researching something, like just some kind of hobby? I don't know, there's golf players, people like that. I like little electronic projects. I always tell myself I'm going to build like this high-end audio amp and stuff like that, and I start researching all the little circuit boards or maybe like speaker building or something like that, and I go look at all these drivers and stuff. I'll look up, and I've spent an hour and a half looking at stupid audio stuff. It's just like, where did the time go? And so maybe a time limit would be good for me. Anyway. But here's one of the things that I love about the way the Roku works, and that's this bottom slide right here called bedtime. That's the hours of operations. That time of day setting. I am way over time on this. Sorry about that. But that's that time of day setting. This one's very important, so I apologize for that. That's that time of day setting where I can say this is when it shuts off. It's set at 10:30 here. That's just when I took the screenshot. It's actually 9 o'clock. That may have been during school, summer hours or something. But they just recently added the feature where you can change it for weekends. So, like ideally, bedtime would be maybe, like I say here, it's 10 o'clock and 10:30. Like I said, I don't know when and if anything was being used by this when I took the screenshot. Right now, ours is set up for 9 o'clock on weeknights and 10:30 on Saturdays, I think. Just the way it works out. Seemed like, they were, oh, you know, that was just the way it works. So, but anyway, it shuts off. After that, it doesn't work anymore. And I know when it's 10 o'clock, and I know how well it works, because if the boys are ever watching like a show or something like that BattleBots, at 10:30, I hear them walking up the stairs going, ah, TV shut off. Good. Time for bed. That's just the way I am as a parent. But I mean, I know it works because we test it about once a week. They'll come up and say, yeah, the internet shut off. Uh-huh. Yeah, it did. Good. So this is a great, like I said, if I had one thing to buy, I'm a big fan of this thing. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it one of the most foundational levels of the software that I use? Yes. Here's the way the app looks. I'll browse around in it for just a second. Not really tell you anything that you didn't already see, but just to kind of get you some ideas of how it moves. Those are all the devices on the network. You see that Titus has a Nintendo 3DS, then it's paused. I can unpause it or pause it back. So even though it's not connected, he's got parental controls on the device. It can't do anything. I also control it this way. Just a second, let the video get done and I'll answer your question. But I keep it paused. I can assign it to Titus, and then let's see. I think I go into I go in the home profile. So as you see, the time changed from 10:30 bedtime to 10 o'clock. Usually we send the little guys to bed about 9, so this never hits them. But it's just kind of showing the ways that you can set the awake time and the bedtime, choose the days of the week. Let's see. I think I go into Titus now. So he had 2 devices. He has his desktop he does school on. Then I assigned that 3DS to him. I don't know why that Minecraft's on, but there's a couple of things I leave on for him, but I turn off the ad blocking Google Safe. Here's some of the filter custom settings, like I had to allow MobiSip. I had to allow a Becca, AOP. We use Microsoft Office, so there's some things there that I've got turned on. I can add a website just that easy. I can turn it on or off, or I can delete it. So it's just that easy. I could do that from here. Matter of fact, my wife is asking me to open one up right now for them because they want to do some, there's a little programming course that she got a coupon for. So that's kind of the way it works. Now, you had a question? Trying to think if there was a good way to do that. I think it's not quite that granular for those things. You could probably set that up and deal with that as a time limit, or you could just go in and turn them off. Now, MobiSip or something like that, it is app aware as well, and I think there's a little bit more features in there. Like I said, I kind of do things with a hard stop. So you could probably, here's what I found. I'll put it this way. It doesn't work this way in our household just because the way we do things, but in most American households, social media is the internet. So if you shut it all down, if you shut off social media, you've pretty much shut off the internet the way kids use it today. So you might find that it's pretty much all or nothing anyway. So the computers still work. Like I said, I could shut this down. The boys could be, drawing something. They use SketchUp a lot to do drawings, 3D drawings and things, and they could be doing that all day long, and internet could go off and they'd never know it because it doesn't affect their computer. The computer still works. They just couldn't do something else, perhaps. So I don't know if there's a granular way to do that, but I think in practice you might not know the difference if you follow me. Maybe you do. I don't know. Yes, sir. Yes.
You can shut down one, and you can shut down internet on the cell phone.
Yes.
On the
yes. Yeah. But depending on how you put things in different profiles, you control the bedtimes and the time limits on each profile. So actually one of the ways to troubleshoot it, and I'm way over time and I apologize. Okay, next thing, where do you get that? If you go to the Critical Armor website, I've got a link to it. If I never remember, it's not Get Circle, it's Meet Circle or something. Meet Circle. You can go there, which sounds like you're going to go to a butcher shop when you're going to go to the meat circle. I don't know, but sounds delicious. But anyway, it's you just go there. You can find coupons. The default price is $99, which is well worth it. But you can also get coupons and get it down to like in the 60s occasionally. You just have to catch them. You just have to do a search for Circle coupon or something like that. And yeah, exactly. All right, so next we're going to go to the internet. All right. Question number 1, which of the following controls is considered the easiest and most universal? From all the things we talked about, either removal, ARP poisoning, which is what the Circle does, time of day, profiles, or subnetting. Removal? I'll go along with that. I don't know what I added as the answer here. What's another one that's good? Profile, time of day, yeah. Removal is the best, absolutely. All right, what features prevent the Circle from being, I didn't talk about this. Let's see if you can guess. What feature prevents the Circle from being defeated by unplugging from the electrical power? Kids are smart. I don't like that Circle thing. I'll just unplug it. Battery backup, notification to the app, an audible alarm, A and B, or none of the above? A and B. If the Circle loses power, I get a notification on my phone, but it also has a battery backup. So you can't just unplug it and get around it. It's got a battery that lasts for hours. Yes, sir?
Does that reset the settings if it goes on battery?
Nope. It doesn't.
When the battery dies?
When the battery dies, it stops working. But like I said, if you have it unplugged for that long, then, well, nothing's going to work without power. But so if you lost your power at your house and it was so long that the battery died, then the internet's probably not working anyway. But if your kids did that, or if somebody did that to get around it, then you get the notification on your app that the Circle has lost power.
What if you just unplug the network?
It's connected to Wi-Fi. So you can unplug the network. The network is an additional thing to help, it kind of helps it speed up. And, if you have a lot of devices, they say go ahead and plug it in. But it's still connected to the Wi-Fi. So it's still working even with no plugs plugged in. It's infinite. Cover your kids' ears. Hours. I don't know. It's this big. It can't last for days, but it lasts long enough to send out a message to the parent that says, "Hey, someone unplugged the Circle," or "The Circle lost power," is what it says. Yes. No. All the settings are saved on the device, and also they get pushed up to the Circle cloud, so it's actually pretty cool. Not with the Circle. I have the same problem. Every once in a while, my router loses its mind, and I have to let it wake up in a new world. So no, I've never had a problem like that. It's been rock solid. We've been using it for about almost a year now, and we have not experienced. It's done amazingly well. I can't. Yeah, I say that, and tomorrow we'll have a problem. But it does a great job. Any other questions? All right. Which of the following sources of internet traffic can the Circle not control? Cellular data, Minecraft, web use, or email use? Cellular data. If you flip your phone over to the cell, even most phones, if you've got the choice of Wi-Fi and cellular data, it's going to default to the Wi-Fi, so it will probably still work. But if you turn off the Wi-Fi on your phone, then the Circle is not in the picture anymore, unless you use the Circle Go, which again I have not tested. So it probably works just like MobiSip, fundamentally-ish, in the way the Circle set things up. All right, so take a moment, take a look at your book. I forget which page that is on, page 12. And while you do that, we'll go ahead and take a break. We'll return 20 minutes ago, or 15 minutes ago. So get your time machines out. Make sure your flux capacitor is fluxing. And we'll get back 15 minutes ago. Actually, just let's take about 5 minutes, and I'll try to go faster on the next one. 1,000 for going over schedule. So let's keep the streak alive. Now this one is actually a little bit shorter, so we'll try to go through it quickly, and I'll try not to park on things quite so long. One thing that was pointed out to me, one of the brothers said, you know, sometimes we overcomplicate things, and that is absolutely the case. I'll tell you a IT story. A friend of mine used to be a really good syndicated writer. It still is, I guess. We used to write this article called Keep the Joint Running, and it was an IT article about how just, you know, pragmatic ways to keep businesses going in the course of IT. And he was telling a story how he went to this, you know, it was the day when he lives in Minneapolis, and there was this restaurant he liked to go to, and they had this bottomless bowl of soup. You go in there, we've got a place like that in Raleigh called Green Tomatoes, and you go in there, you just get soup and salad, and it's just bottomless. I mean, it's like a buffet, but it's for soup and salad. So if you're health conscious, then you can do that. If you're like me, you go in there and you eat the pizza and the bread and the cheesy bread and stuff like that, and a couple bowls of soup. So, but anyway, but you know, he's like, how? And he's like, because you could buy a bowl of soup, or you could buy the bottomless bowl of soup and just go back and eat all. He's like thinking, how do they know the difference? Because they aren't like looking at you. You know, you buy it, you walk in, you pay your money, they give you the stuff, and you're gone. You're out in the wild world, you know, of soup. And he's like, how do they tell the difference? How do they do that? And he's thinking of all the IT solutions that he could put in place so that he could do that. He said, well, you could bury like an RFID chip in the bowl so you could, you know, walk around and know, you know, this one is the bottomless bowl and this one is the not bottomless bowl. And he's like, or you could put like armbands on people so, you know, it's like they've got the right armbands so they get more soup or whatever like that. And he's thinking of it. He's like, he realized he didn't know how they told the difference. And so as he's walking out, he stops at the cashier. He goes, you know, I'm curious, how do you tell the people the difference between the people who bought the bottomless bowl and the not bottomless bowl? And they said, oh, that's simple. There's a stripe around the people with the bottomless bowl. He's like, hey, some bowls have a stripe, some don't. And he's like, you know, this is the classic IT mind trying to overcomplicate a really simple thing. Like I said, the simplest thing in the world is you pick up all the remotes and the laptops and the tablets and you take them to your bedroom at night. And that way, they spend the night in the master bedroom, in the closet or in a shelf or or in a drawer somewhere. And that's just brain dead simple. That's the kind of thing I like. All right, so we won't even look at the agenda. That way, it can't convict me. All right, so. We saw this before, Psalm chapter 127, verse 1, except the Lord build the house. I'm going to keep hitting that. We can't do this under our own power. We've got to have God's power because it is a heart thing. If you're going to do this, if you're going to be consistent on it, it's a change of heart. Change of heart leads to a change of mind and action. But you can't have any change in mind and action unless you have a change in the heart. What I'm trying to get you to do is not necessarily talk about these individual little technical details. You can get individual technical details on the websites. There's a dozen of them that'll tell you how to set up this or turn off this or turn on that thing. That's great. I couldn't possibly be comprehensive in that world. But what I can do is alert you to the fact that there are risks out there, but there's also ways to mitigate those risks. And the things that you do today are going to be different than the things that you might be doing next year to do the same job, to mitigate the same risks. So you need to get your mind, you need to be able to identify risks. You need to be able to be situationally aware and know that there's things out there that you can do. Why? Because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Internet, entertainment, devices, print material, all these things are vying for your heart to distract you, the inward man, which again causes changes in the outward man. And everybody stand still. All right. Okay, so internet, we won't go in there. Here's the thing. We think of children becoming more mature in a linear fashion. I do not let my 3-year-olds drive a car on the highway, or my 6-year-olds now. I don't give them the keys to the car if they don't drive on the highway. But there comes a time, Evan just turned 16. He, even though he hasn't gone and done it yet, he's getting to the point where he can go and get his license. And he could actually drive on the highway. I still wouldn't let him go alone. He'd have to have a brother or something with him. Kendra, she's 20. She can drive on the highway. She couldn't drive on the highway when she was 3. Why? Because that has progressively matured. They started out, they couldn't even reach the pedals. One day they got big enough where they could reach the pedals, but maybe they weren't mentally mature enough. And you know, about 16, you can start teaching that. Not every kid could do that at 16, by the way. Some people are never able to drive a car because of different things. But, you know, there's a certain progression there, right? You follow me? That's for driving a car. Internet's not the same way. I can give a 3-year-old a cell phone that has full internet access, and they can sit in the church pew after church and play games for hours. And I'm not really that worried about it. 2-year-old, 3-year-old, yeah, because they're not browsing the internet. They're playing a little game. I can't do that with a 16-year-old. I don't give them a cell phone with full internet access and let them sit by themselves and play with it for hours. Why? Because the maturity profile, the difference between driving a car and using the internet is an entirely different maturity profile. Why do we think, and I have heard this, well, he's been such a good kid, and you know, he's been very mature, so we were able to, you know, we thought at 15 he was able to get his own cell phone. We thought that was a good idea because he's shown maturity. Even in the secular world, we make jokes about raging hormones and things like that in teen. Are you telling me that you're giving them the most dangerous access to bad stuff at the most dangerous time in their life, and you think that they've shown maturity? I could give them the keys to the car, but I'm not giving them the internet. It's different. We need to change our thinking about these things. It's different. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, anybody, I think, can see that there's a difference here. Why can I give a 3-year-old the internet and not a car? Because it's different. Why can I give a 16-year-old maybe a car and not the internet? Huh. Maybe it's not all the same. All right, so there's a different maturity process there. We got to be wise. Here's another thing. You got a wedding ring up there. How does this have to do with the internet? Well, we'll get there. We use a Roman-type wedding in our society. You say, well, what do you mean by that? That's the whole idea of the rings, the father giving away the bride. That's actually a Roman-style wedding. We learned that from the Hellenic Greeks and stuff like that. It's just a Western thing, you know, European thing. We brought that over here, and that's just the way we do things. Nothing necessarily wrong with it. But the Jewish wedding was different. The Jewish wedding was much different. A man and a woman would become engaged or betrothed. That's where Joseph and Mary were. And that was essentially as like they were wedded, but they had not come together. You know, just like Joseph and Mary. You know the Bible verses? What was Joseph doing? Well, at that point in time, the man would go away, build a house, build his fortune, get the household ready. And when he was ready, at a time sometimes when the bride would not even know necessarily, there was announcement and stuff like that, but you know, could be months, it could be a year or two, then he would return to her father's house, catch his bride away, and take her to his house. And in between that period of when they were actually betrothed and the time when he was working, and before he went and got that was the betrothal period. That's where Joseph and Mary were. They were legally married, but they had not come together. Isn't that a beautiful picture of how the Lord does with His church? I mean, churches, I mean, the bride of Christ. I mean, literally, He's gone to prepare a place for us. And He's going to come get us. Praise the Lord. Well, that's the Jewish way. The Western way that we do it, the Roman way, is, and this works too in a certain kind of way. I mean, yeah, there's a Bible picture there, but here's the thing I want you to know. The Roman wedding, my daughter, who is in a courtship relationship right now, The young man actually drove all night last night from Springfield to North Carolina. He's there. He stays with our pastor and his wife at their house, and he's visiting Kendra. He's a great guy. Good guy. In medical school, getting ready to go to his medical college. He just finished his bachelor's degree. No debt. Straight A's. Good guy. I like him. Godly guy. Just loves the Lord. So, but you know, he's not allowed to hold my wife's hand, or not allowed to hold my wife's hand, for heaven's sakes. He's not allowed to hold my daughter's hand either. You know why? First of all, it's good for a man not to touch a woman. To him to know what to do good and do with it not, to him it is sin, right? We know that. But here's another thing. She's under my authority. That's my household. That's my daughter. She's under my authority. He will not damage or take advantage of my authority by taking my daughter's hand. That's not going to happen. It will not happen. Why? Because she's under my authority. One day, though, I'm going to walk her up the aisle. The preacher's going to say, "Who gives this woman away?" And I'll say, whatever you're supposed to say that everybody always gets wrong, her mother and me, her mother and I, whatever it is. And I'm going to place her hand in his. What does that symbolize? That symbolizes a transfer of authority from my authority to another man's authority. Okay, why did I say all that? Because men and women use the internet differently. Men and women have problems with fleshly things differently. Whereas a man is a very physical and visual creature. That's why, young ladies, you don't need to dress incorrectly. It bothers the men around you. It is a stumbling block for us because we're visual, we're physical. That's the way God made men to be. Yes, the fall and the curse has made that far worse, but God designed that for a purpose originally. Yeah, it's gone away from that original purpose because of the sin that has entered into the world. But God designed that for a specific thing. So men are visual, physical. What are women? Emotional. What's the difference between a man and a woman? When a boy holds a girl's hand, he's thinking, physical contact. When I hold my wife's hand, I get a thrill. It's a physical, visceral thrill. Because I love my wife. I love to hold her hand. I love that physical contact. I'm authorized. I have a license for hand holding. This is my license right here. I've got a hand holding license. When my wife holds my hand, she doesn't have the same kind of thrill. It's an emotional feeling. It's a, I'm secure, I'm safe, he loves me. It's a different thing. I don't understand it all, but it is different. So when you start thinking about the internet and how ladies use the internet and how men use the internet, it's totally different. Why are there so many problems? Why, you know, a lot of people have one Facebook account. If you use Facebook at all, you'll see a man and a woman be like John and Susan Jones as one Facebook account. Because for so long, when Facebook came out, there were guys, or more importantly, women, who were connecting with old high school flames because Facebook would go out, find out where you went to school, connect you with all of your old classmates, and then the old high school romances would flare up, and there were divorces, many divorces that were coming about because people were reconnecting with an old high school flame on Facebook. It's a danger. But why was that happening? It wasn't because the guy was thinking about it. Yeah, he was doing it. He was in a different probable mindset. But the woman was remembering the feelings and all of that and reconnecting that way. So I want to point out to you, men, women, boys, girls, you parents for your children, men and women can get messed up on the internet in entirely different ways. If all you're doing is filtering against pornography and sexual images, that's good for boys, but that may not be good for your young ladies. See what I'm saying? Just something to be aware of. Dads, you don't understand this perhaps, but your wife does. Let her help you. You might not be as aware. That's why, God, in most homes, praise the Lord, you've got a man and a father and a mother, because there's aspects of this or child rearing that sometimes it's hard for the other sex to realize. I don't know everything that motivates my daughter, but praise the Lord, my wife's there and she does. I can't explain it all. But the world doesn't understand the difference between love and lust anyway. If you go to Wikipedia and you search for the word lust and the word love, if you didn't know the names were different, you'd have a hard time telling the difference between the definitions. In the secular world, you look it up in most dictionaries today, and you hide the words love and lust at the top, I could almost dare you to say, I bet you can't tell the difference between the definitions. Now, we are Bible believers. We know love isn't a feeling. Love can produce feelings, but love is not a feeling. Your young ladies might not know that. What does the Bible say? The most well-known verse in all the world? For God so loved. What does that word so? Does it mean this much? No, it means in this way. Like it is so. God in this way loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son. That's what that word so means. That this is the measure, this is the action, this is the commitment by which God proved His love. It isn't a greatness or a size word. It is an in this way or after this manner word. Love is an action. It is not a feeling. Your young ladies don't understand that any more than your young men can't really understand what's going on with their hormones and why they're so visual and all this other stuff. Your young ladies don't understand why they're so emotional. They don't understand that love is an action. They don't understand the security that comes in a marriage where a man is committing to love and provide for only one young woman, and how the security and how the honor that the young woman gives to that man. Read Ephesians chapter 5 sometime. Notice the difference between men love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. He says love, action. Women, honor. Not love. It's easy for a woman to love her husband. She needs to honor her husband, because that's how the man gets the charge. All right, so it's different. It is different. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 3 and 6 tells us, do not defraud your brother. Why can't Levi hold Kendra's hand, my daughter's hand? He's not going to defraud me in my authority. And not only that, that's great. Why did I keep other people from holding her hand if they do get married? Because I don't want him defrauded by some other guy in the past. All right, enough said. Boys and girls are different. I didn't have to talk about that too long, I hope. I think we accept that. All right, real quick. Here's the last line of defense I use technologically. It's called OpenDNS. You can use it for free. Somebody was asking me last night about phishing and different kinds of bad emails and stuff like that. OpenDNS is free. DNS is the network addressing structure. It stands for Domain Name Services. What it does is computers do not understand English language, or Chinese for that matter. They don't understand human languages. They understand numbers. Really, the only thing they understand is binaries, ons and offs, zeros and ones. So, how do I find a website out there? If I go type in Google to the browser, my computer doesn't know where Google is. Google doesn't exist in the technological world. An IP address exists. That IP address is like the house number of your home. It doesn't refer to you as the content of your home. It refers to where your home physically is. Occasionally, we pick up all of our stuff, put them in boxes, and move it to another house. The content of the house hasn't changed. My family's still there, but the house number has, because we live in a different house. That IP address is kind of an abstraction, a location of where that content lives. The content can change, but the IP address, that house number, the content is the same, it stays the same, but the house number where I've located it can change. So you need a system or a server to tell your computer where to go find stuff. So every time you type an IP or a network browser or domain name into your browser, it sends out a message to your DNS servers that you have configured in your home and says, hey, I'm trying to find google.com. Where is that? The DNS server says, all right, let me look through. Okay, right now it's at 8.8.8.8, which is where the DNS servers of Google is, which you could also use. So DNS basically translates human language into a series of numbers, an address that the computer can understand and go out to the internet and find things. Well, what does that mean? Well, sometimes people do things like spoofing, and they'll infiltrate different DNS servers or use local host files to tell you that instead of google.com being at 8.8.8, it's actually over here at 243, 243, 243, 243. Well, what's really over there? Well, some Russian website that's trying to collect your information. You've typed in Google, your computer, because of some kind of attack or some kind of exploitation or whatever, thinks, oh, I'm supposed to go over here instead of to the right place because somebody's gotten in there and changed that. OpenDNS is actively monitored by Cisco, who just recently bought it, and they prevent that type of phishing attack or that type of domain spoofing from happening. So for free, you can put the OpenDNS IP addresses in for your DNS servers and get some level of protection just for free. What do? Well, you have an internet service. From your internet service, you get usually 2 DNS addresses. They assign them dynamically. You probably don't even know what they are or where they come from or where those servers sit. But you can change them, and you can use OpenDNS. If you don't know how to do that, I can kind of tell you, but here's what I want to do. There's several of the men here in this church that understand exactly what I'm talking about. And if you have a situation where you want to make this change, they can kind of help you out. It's not that hard. You go to a particular spot. I won't go into it here because it's a little fiddly. But it's not that hard, and you can save it and change it and then kind of fire and forget. But OpenDNS, like I said, for free, you get some basic phishing and filtering and security there because they actively maintain their DNS records. They don't let people stick fake data in. They really watch it closely. They've got this entire staff of people that do nothing but maintain these records. So that's great. They also offer a service that does internet filtering. So you can pay them, I think it's like $12 or $18 or something like that a year. I do. Actually, I bought it a long time ago when it was $12. I think it's like 18 now, but anyway. And what they do is they can filter adult content. It's kind of this exact same filtering you'd see in MobiSip and on the Circle. You get some of the same filtering here at the internet level. So you don't even it doesn't even tell you where the IP addresses of the bad sites are. It's not that you have a device there trying to prevent them from coming in. Your computer is never even told where they are to begin with because OpenDNS never tells you what that IP address is. So it's kind of cool. It's like my final layer of defense. I don't really pay much attention to this. I have it set up with some, filter adult content and filter, that kind of stuff. I just set it up and I kind of forget it and it just works. But literally, you couldn't even get to some of these sites to begin with because OpenDNS will never tell you where they are. Yes, Pastor? Nope. The whole network. You put it into your Wi-Fi access point. And that way, your Wi-Fi, your one internet source, is set up this way, and that way everything on your network uses these domain name servers. Yes? It can, because they filter out, a lot of times the blacklisted. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of times those spams come from like one source or like 1 or 2 servers out there. So they'll filter that stuff out as just a bad sender. They basically blacklist those things and they keep up with that. So it does a little bit. Yeah. That's really not, they do that. It's more for looking up websites and domain names. Here, I'll show you this real quick. This is what it looks like. Good evening, Joseph. I hadn't noticed that. It says, it looks like it's late in your time zone. Hope it's nothing serious, is what the message said. Anyway, so you can go to my family here, and I can look at the total requests Give it just a second for it to load. It shows you, this is how much activity. Apparently, there was a lot of activity on the, what was that, the 30th of August when I took this video. Come on. But I can also, here's the settings. You can't really see it very well, but it's like academic, fraud, alcohol, automotive, chat, drugs, file storage, gambling, government, humor, lingerie, news and media, file sharing, podcast, portals. I mean, it just, so many different categories that you can select from. I don't use a lot of these. Like I said, I do some just basic filtering here on pornographic stuff or lingerie stuff, and so that stuff never gets in. I do all the other filtering at, the circle level or MobiSip. So this is just like, this is how I filter things coming in to begin with. You can even have it point up. I've got a little logo I created. You can have it when it blocks you from there. You can say, your dad says no, or whatever. You can change even the messages. And it keeps all of the cache. I mean, it keeps a really long history of domains. Now, it is all domains, all internet sites that your home network has used. So it's a huge list, and it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense because it's everything. When the Roku goes and checks for updates at 60.111.3.2, what's that? I don't really know, but you can search for it and find out this Roku. This is not where I necessarily go to find out what the activity's been. It is a full list, but that means it's a full list of a lot of stuff that I may not even know necessarily what they are. So I use the Roku. I use the logs on the Circle and the MobiSip would be better than this, because this is just too much. There's just so much that goes into this log file because it's everything. Some of it may not be meaningful, and it's hard to filter out what you need. But if you're down to that where you're really trying to find something that's wrong, this may be where I have to go and actually spend the time to look through it. So anyway, it's just the last layer of protection. It does a little filtering, but what I really like is the fact that there are comprehensive logs there for everything, and it's just, like I said, it stops even bad things from coming in. Yes, sir? You have to set it up. Okay, so here's how it works. All the computers in your network get usually the DNS settings from your Wi-Fi access point. Your Wi-Fi access point gives you dynamic addresses. So you add a new device. You don't have to worry about what numbers are setting up. You just get an address from your Wi-Fi access point. So that's where you set it up. You change it on the access point. You put OpenDNS in there. And then any new device or anytime you renew your lease on your address on your current devices, you get that information. Now here's where the things get a little bit weird. Most people from their home, they have what's called a dynamically assigned network address. You have your stuff on the inside that's like the 192, 168s, that kind of stuff that's just a common internal. You probably have it set up at the church. We could probably find out here. You might be on a 1010 or something. Like, there's certain addresses that everybody uses that's just internal non-routable addresses. On the outside, though, where you actually get your internet from the real world, that means on that side you have to have a public IP address. That's the only way the internet works. You have to be assigned some public IP address. So it's to be like 76.45.2.233. Whatever it is, it's assigned from your internet service provider. That's dynamically assigned. Again, you probably don't know about this. But the only way OpenDNS works with the filtering, it works good for just the phishing stuff automatically. But if you're going to set up filtering like I do, one of your computers inside the house has to tell OpenDNS every so often, okay, this is the IP address I'm going out on. It needs to know which public IP address you're going out on, so it knows the requests that are coming from you versus somebody else's. So that's a little fiddly. So like I said, I don't say this is one of my top recommendations. This is something I use. It's good for a lot of things. If you're just going to use it just for phishing, that's good too, just to prevent phishing. This is something that you could use for free. If you want a little extra protection, you can set this up, but it's a little bit more technical. Again, somebody around here might be able to help. But I bring it up because I think one of my point is that there's something at each layer of this that I've broken out that can be done. There's certain things that you can do at each layer that helps protect your family. Okay. Real quick, I also threw VidAngel in here. VidAngel, we already talked about that. There's a Fire TV channel. There's a Roku channel. I don't think they have an Apple TV channel yet for Fire TV, but you could also play it through a Chromecast or something. You could probably play it through your phone on the iPhone app to Apple TV through Aircast. So you could probably do it that way. Again, works very well. If you're a Star Wars fan, you can actually turn off all Jar Jar Binks. It will actually get rid of him completely. So, yeah, there's something. We talked about Netflix. It actually has some parental controls. You can put on PIN numbers. It doesn't work in the Roku app, it turns out. I turned them on, and Kendra comes and says, yeah, I was folding laundry, and I was trying to watch something, and it just wouldn't even come up. And I'm like, oh, really? And she goes, yeah. I said, oh, I wonder. And it just, the Roku, our old Roku, actually doesn't prompt for the PIN. So I turned on the PIN in Netflix for content ratings, and it just basically broke it. So, but I think on a newer device, it would actually ask you for the PIN. But it does have some controls. You probably don't even know they're there. I've got an article on my website that walks you through it. Just remember, don't use the same PIN for everything. And we'll talk about managing passwords after lunch. There's things like Kitty, or Kiddle rather. You know, you can save that as your internet search provider, save that as your home page. Maybe you don't even use that. I personally wouldn't, but you know, if you've got to let the kids search the internet, go to Kiddle or something like that. There's a couple of these that forces the Google Safe Search. It's there. You might as well use it. If you're going to be using Google, why not use this? It's the same. It uses Google in the back end, but puts a little wrapper around it that only allows Google Safe Search. So just another little layer of protection. Once again, I don't trust those kind of things. I use a program called KeyPass. It's free and open source. You create an encrypted password database. You can install it on Macs. You can install it on Windows. I can create my password database there. I store it on a cloud server. You can store it on iCloud. You could store it on Dropbox. You could store it. I personally do it on OneDrive. That holds all of my passwords. It actually can help you randomize. It can suggest random passwords. You can create profiles. You can actually cause it to auto type. So when you get to a website, you can say Control A, and it will type your password in for you. And there's other things that can do that, but those other things like RoboForm can't do this, which is share that database out to a cloud server and give me the ability to have an app on my phone so all of my passwords are with me at all times. There's a couple of different ways to do this. This is the free way to do it, using KeyPass, and the app on the iPhone is called Mini KeyPass. But I can open up that database. So I can literally have randomized pins on every device in my house. I can randomize all the passwords on everything I set up, and I do. I use an 8-character random password, uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters like exclamation marks and stuff. All of my passwords are completely random. I don't have to remember them. I keep them in this locked password database. I go in there, and I'm working on Titus's computer. Oh, it prompted me for a password. Which one is that? Here's the password. Type it in. Ready to go. It's a little extra effort. But there is no 2 passwords in my household that are the same. Yes, sir?
So essentially, you go to this app, you tell it you want a password, it generates it, you can then tell it what you want, and then you type
Yes, and if I'm needing the password on my phone, like to a website, I can go to the app, copy the password, and type it in. If I'm on a computer, I can hit Control-Alt-A, and it auto types it in if I've got it configured for that website, which is a little bit of an extra step. But for the things that I commonly use, but it's very easy to cut and paste. When I'm working on one of the kids' computers or something, I usually am sitting there with my phone. I'm having to type it in manually, but usually it just takes a second. It takes me longer to find the password than to type it. But it's still got a search field. I think I have a video. This is what the app looks like. I've got different groups set up. So this is my personal group. You can search for a particular thing, like I created one called Example. It's got my username and password. The password's hidden, but I can hit the little eyeball and see it. Password 123 exclamation mark. You can save it to the website that it goes to. One other thing that you might not have noticed there, and this is another thing that I use this for, you know how websites have like your security questions? Don't use stuff that are actually real in there. Where did you go on your honeymoon? Buick Riviera. What's your favorite thing to eat? Craftsman end wrench. I don't know. Just put random stuff in there. That's an additional password step. If your kids know where you went on your honeymoon or your mother's maiden name, they might be able to crack your password. And anybody else. Why not use that as an additional security feature? And then you can store them. There's a big note blank in the middle of KeyPass, and you can just type all that stuff in there, and then you have it. So I don't know what I put there. What city were you born in? I've got this whole series of passwords where the what city were you born in, where I've picked random cities from around the world. Barcelona, Spain. I was not born in Barcelona, Spain, and nobody would ever think that I was. But if somebody's trying to hack my password, they're going to put Springfield, Missouri. They got no idea what I put there, and I'm not going to let them know because I put it basically randomized. Yeah, it's got a note field in there, so I just type them in. Yes, you do. You have to unlock the database. So I have a fairly long and complex password that I use there, and I change it periodically. But that's my master password, and I guard that one very, very carefully. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, because it's actually the database of password is stored in the cloud somewhere. I create it on my laptop. And I download and I create the first one. So once you do that, you push it up to Dropbox or something like that. Just basically anything that you have a sync. So I use OneDrive, so I put it in my OneDrive. I've got a folder called Security, and that's where that always goes. It's in my OneDrive. I used to use Dropbox. You could use iCloud if that's the way you do it. And at that point, all of those are there. This mini KeyPass app is actually just opening up that archive from that location. So you can, you could destroy your phone every day, and you're not going to mess up your passwords. You're going to mess up your bank account, but you're not going to mess up your passwords. Yeah. Any other questions? Is everybody getting hungry? All right. Which systems what do we call the system that translates language-based names into numeric addresses? Is it WINS, DHCP, DNS, or HTTP? DNS. Very good. All right, question 2. Which of the following should be the most carefully guarded for women of all ages? The minds, emotions, checkbook, eyes, habits, or Pinterest? All right, emotions, right. Or Pinterest. It's kind of the same thing, right? Okay. Well, I realized something early on in our wedding or our marriage that, my wife, she shops differently from me. I don't mind walking around stores, and maybe I'm weird, but I don't mind walking around with her. I don't do it myself, but with her, I enjoy being with her. So we'll walk around stores, and she'll be picking stuff up, and she's doing this with like articles of clothing. I'm like, she's doing this. She's like does this, and she shakes it. I'm like, what are you doing? You think it's going to fall off the hanger or something? She's like, I just want to see how it moves. Okay. It's a real thing, apparently. All right, so which of the following is an attempt to prevent bad images from being accidentally found by unrelated searches? Circle mode, Google free, Bing mode, or safe search? Safe search. Bing has one, Google has one. They have a safe search where they try to prevent things from popping up, on unrelated searches. But as we all know, that doesn't always help. Sometimes things are badly rated. So you can't trust it. All right, I think we're done. Spend a moment with your book, and then we will break for lunch. DNS. You can find that in a search pretty quickly. It's open source. It's free software. We talked about VidAngel. We talked about Netflix. We talked about OpenDNS. Pastor?